Hi, welcome to Legends and Lore episode 9, I think it is. So I'm Anna B. Meyer, and with me is, as usual.
Mike Bridges. Anna,
Yeah.
today should be a fun show
Mm-hmm.
because today we have guest Brian Bloomclot, the major domo of the Facebook group Cannon Fire, a Greyhawk resource. Uh, Tell us your bona fides, Brian.
Hang on a second. First, we just need to ask chat that they can actually hear us. So we have,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it
Audio check.
seems to be good on our end here, but we have to make sure that they can hear us. So yeah, then we have to wait 6 seconds for it, and we got some good favorites in chat too. So yep, awesome.
How many people do we have?
Hear yes, see no.
Okay. It will probably come. Yeah, I can see the stream, so that way I know it's okay. Yep,
I actually see it on mine. I
yep,
just
we
have the
see the
sound
stream.
off.
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yep. So it's perfect. They can hear us. Then that's good. Yep. Sorry for the interruption. Now we need to go to Brian, the guest of honor.
Huh.
The guest of honor. Okay. Oh, so you're asking me?
Yeah,
Okay.
what
So
you been
my
up to, Brian?
oh God, what have I not been up to? So since March I've been running the Cannon Fire Facebook group, and we've gone from slightly under 200 members to now we should almost be at 900, if not just a little bit over today.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, but part of that is having regular content. People are starting to contribute their own stuff. It's kind of taking on a life of its own. It's starting to
Just
get
like the old days.
like the old days. It's starting to get of a size. I mean, we're not as big as Anna's group, the Flanass Geographical Society, or even
You
or
close.
Sieges of Earth. I mean, you guys are clocking
It's-
it around 2,000
Yeah,
members
almost
each.
almost 1800, or maybe I'm past 1800s. I'm not really sure, but
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah,
close to 1800 or
yeah, yeah,
around 1800.
Wow.
Yep.
yeah. I mean, I'll get there.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
it,
It's the
it's
same
just
group. They should be kind of, yeah,
I'm
basically the
hoping
same
to
people.
cross
Sure.
pollinate from
Yeah.
different.
Hmm.
There's a lot of different Greyhawk groups out there. I just happen to work on one, and I assist on yours occasionally
Hmm.
as an admin.
Yeah.
And then I also do. I just got control of my Greyhawk Heraldry website on Greyhawk Online. That is actually about to, at some point, Icarus is going to have to come on here and talk about, the work he's doing with Grodog on Greyhawk Online and what that's going to entail. I'll let him do that. But yeah, I was
Coming
finally
soon.
able to,
Hmm.
yeah, hopefully soon. And I finally got access. It's almost been 10 years since I was last able to access it. And it was just nice to, I've forgotten how to use Dreamweaver, and and my HTML foo is really super weak right now. But I'm really scared to touch anything right now because for fear of breaking it. But eventually I'll get back in there and I'll do some cleanup, and then I got to figure out what to do with the site and what I'm going to do moving forward. I really do want to do heraldry, Greyhawk heraldry specifically again. I've been dabbling here and there. I've done a couple pieces this year just for fun. I did one for the old Kingdom of Iu's shield. I've created one for the Knight Protectors of the Great Kingdom, which
Hmm.
you've used on your map.
Yep. Thank you so much for that one. That was fantastic. Yep.
You're very, very welcome. And then I did another one just to kind of see how I could do it for Duchy of Tenna,
Hmm.
and that led me down a rabbit hole where I was trying to figure out what that was heraldically, because I had no way to describe it. Right? It's a symbol, right? And I didn't know what it was, and Gary isn't around to tell me what it is. And so I started reading. I think I hit something in Dragonfoots that talked about these things called tagmas, or I think I'm saying that right. And it's kind of a Turkish, Mongol, kind of even Slavic piece that has come from the nomads, and it's really more of a brand that became this mark. And that now, and there's versions of that through a lot of different cultures. Like Germany has it in their heraldry, and they have like this crazy system of describing it. And those are the house marks, which I'd never heard of before. That was like, so like, this question about Tenna leads me down this whole path into like Eastern European heraldry I'd never really looked at. Then I was looking at German and Icelandic and even Swedish and Finnish heraldry that have these marks in them, which I did not realize was a thing. And now I'm like trying to figure. So that's leading to some different things and kind of making me rethink how the different cultures bring things to heraldry in the world of Greyhawk.
Who knew?
And we can talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Because I have some rough ideas. I haven't really made it clear. I'm not really totally clear. It's like, like in real world heraldry, there's a huge difference between England and Germany and France or Canada, for that example. Actually, one of the craziest books I ever got, I did a fun Ramones inspired shield for a buddy of my brother's who's a big record collector, and he really wanted this coat of arms with these symbols from the Ramones albums. And so I made it for him, and then he sent me from London this beautiful full color book of heraldry of Haiti when they had thrown off the colonial government and become this free country. All the nobles took on European heraldry, and so there's this complete set of heraldry I'd never heard of before, and it's beautiful. Right? And so that's but that's very different from European heraldry in terms of the norms and the colors used and the kind of some of the symbols that are being used in terms of what shows up. And so I don't see heraldry as this kind of monolithic one thing. For right now, the way I think about it, heraldry in the world of Greyhawk is the Kingdom of Keeland has its form of heraldry. The Great Kingdom has its form of heraldry, and they've cross-pollinated. And then the nomads in the north have these tagmas, and the Duchy of Ten, the civilized barbarians, have incorporated that into proper heraldry. And then how I'm going to talk about that, I haven't discovered yet. And that's going to be more of a Flanish influence with some stuff from the Baklunish Iridian nomads. And so, we'll see how that all goes. But what I want to kind of do is kind of establish kind of motifs and norms of different heraldic groupings so that the heraldry from those regions has kind of a cohesiveness to them. It's not going to be like a hard and fast rule where you can't have something as an exception to the rule, because there always is one. But I kind of want to have a story in there somehow. And I want it to, and that isn't going to mean a hill of beans to most players, but it's just going to be kind of a nice visual thing that will distinguish Keo-ish heraldry from stuff that came from the Great Kingdom. And then, of course, in Greyhawk, they just pirate arms, and you could buy nobility, and everybody turns their nose up at whatever college of heraldry exists in Greyhawk, because they're just a bunch of bandits stealing other people's arms.
Factor.
Yeah. So go ahead.
So Brian, in the chat, Ryan Glade is asking, does Greyhawk heraldry have to be all done in French? Explain that question to me, or answer it.
I think the reason that it's been done in French is it's just been pretty traditional, because you got to remember, back in the medieval era, the court language was French, right?
Yeah,
and so it was, that's why we say a lingua franca, as kind of like what the base language. So for in the game world, common is the current lingua franca, right?
Yeah.
And the names of countries, like the titles of countries, like you have duchies and county, that's a French term for it too. So there's some French connections
It's
that
been
way.
adapted by different group. Yeah, they have different names. Yeah. So I think that's a holdover, because people read a lot of medieval heraldry, and that's what they use. Right. I think that we can anglicize that so it's easier to understand. It's just been kind of just a standard, and that's why people have done it that way. I've kind of gone back and forth on that. Sometimes I do both. Sometimes I do one or the other, where I'll say, instead of saying argent, which is silver or white, I'll just say argent in parentheses silver, or I'll say silver. It just depends on the mood I'm in.
I see. Okay.
But there's really no reason to do it other than that's just how it's kind of done in traditional heraldry. I will say one thing, just kind of getting back into kind of Greyhawk heraldry. The interesting thing that Gary did, and I don't know if it was just poking fun, because he's, as historically aware as he was, he had to know that making bronze as a metal was terrible heraldry, because heraldry is all about contrast. You want light versus dark, and bronze is basically brown. And if you make that a metal, which is traditionally these light colors, gold and silver, white and yellow, and in some heraldic traditions, orange is another one. When you bring in that dark brown, you lose the contrast, which is why the Duchy of Earthshield just drives me insane, because you have this brown bearer on a green field and it looks like mud on grass. Right. And you if you were to look at that across a field of battle, you wouldn't be able to tell what it is. And so all the artistic cheats they do, like they backlight the bear, or they put like a light circle of line around it to make it pop off the shield. It's just terrible heraldry, right? But we're stuck with it. That's the shield for the Duchy of Ernst, for good or bad. And it should have been gold. It should have been white. Silver or gold, but whatever. It is what it is. There's a couple others in there where I'm going, yeah, that's okay. We'll just deal with that.
All right. How about Ardent Moth's question about non-human heraldry?
Yeah, we have the elves and the dwarves and gnomes.
How do you handle that?
Yeah.
I did. There's actually a piece of my heraldic site where I took the Dubedan coat of arms and I tried to kind of do something where I said the shield that was shown for Dubedan, I believe that was in From the Ashes on that one map that they had in there for the regional campaign map that came in From the Ashes. They had this Dubedan shield that was essentially a light blue with a shield with a dark blue cross on it, and then it had a gold harp on it. And it was done in a heater style shield. And that was the Dwarven Dumedan clan from the Aberrals. That was their arms. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would dwarves have a heater shield? They don't have knights, running around jousting on a field. I always kind of saw dwarves as kind of more, round shield kind of guys. And so what I did is I actually designed a circular shield with those arms on it, and then I put this kind of gray border around it with runes on it. And that was kind of my part of that was just I didn't have the technical skill to do something really super artistic myself, where I could do something more abstract.
Yeah. What about giving the dwarves a tower shield? Use a tower shield symbol for dwarves.
However which way you want to do it. But basically what I did, that was just the time I did that back in 2007. And basically what I did, so I had this round shield. This is what the arms really is. If you were to go talk to Dubedan.
Yeah.
But this is the human representation of those arms. And
yeah,
so
exactly. That's
right.
Mm.
And so like those elvish shields to me are merely an attempt by a human herald to represent what elvish heraldry looks like to them, because what they're doing is they're hearing the words describing the shield. There's this thing called the blazon, which is the words of describing the shield, and then there's the emblazon, the actual picture. And what you would do is you would send the words to someone, and they could read that. They'd understand in the order of the words and the type of words they were using. They could draw that shield. Now, it wouldn't look exactly like what the herald in that other country drew, but it'd be close enough because there was these norms, right? And so for me, to me, like, it'd be very difficult for me to do elvish heraldry, because in my mind, elves would have, they know who their people are and what their battles. They might have some house symbols, but it's very abstract.
Yeah, but
It's
they might
not
have something for an official for the humans neighbors, so to speak, for other countries.
Right.
Yeah.
So Celine has that tree on a
Yeah.
purple shield, and that's just convenient for those mortals over there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a
They
foreign
seem to be
policy.
obsessed with these symbols that they need to have.
Yeah.
There you go, tree.
Yeah. Here you go.
Yeah.
You know, and so we're gonna have this fancy tree on a purple shield, and these knights are going, tree. You know, wreath of acorns and leaves around it. What's that? And so, it would take someone with a lot more artistic talent to, I think, really represent what an actual elven piece of heraldry was. And so I don't really try to do that. I just don't have the wherewithal to do it.
And how about humanoid heraldry?
Humanoid heraldry, I think, is actually more a convenience for those humanoids that serve or have served human or other kind of
So you don't think they have like a battle standard or something for their tribe or clan or whatever they call it?
I think hobgoblins would have something similar to the Roman Empire standards,
because
they're very organized. But orcs is much more symbolic. It might be just body paint.
Yeah,
you know, or
it's like the hand of
right.
Like
I don't really see orcs getting really like, wow, we got to design a flag.
It might be a war paint something. They paint their faces in different or something.
There's probably a way that and they're not really about orders of battle and identification. You know, they might have something so that that has more meaning to them in terms of dominating their enemies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like there isn't really anything that talks about that in Greyhawk or frankly in D&D. I mean, no one's really kind of thought about that in any great depth. But for me, the way I would look at it is are these orcs in the service of someone and they've been given this symbol, or are like say in the Pomage? I think a lot of the symbols there have to do with Turish Mac trying to keep control and
he organized the country, so to speak.
To kind of organize his armies, such as they are in some fashion. I mean, organizing gnolls and orcs, that's an interesting concept. But like I said, is that that's really kind of up to the DM how you want to present those monsters in your world. I don't want to get in there and say you have to do it this way.
No,
I'm just presenting ideas because I haven't really settled on anything, and frankly, I would hope that someone who has a talent in that regard could come up with something interesting. I think there's room for that. There doesn't have to be one person doing this. I enjoy the things that I do, but I can't do it all.
Yep.
That's really what it comes down to. Anything else out there?
Yeah, Lika wants to know if the Soul Imperium had a primary heraldry. I guess.
As far as I understand, and I think some of this comes from from the Scarlet Brotherhood stuff that Sean K. Reynolds wrote, because there isn't a whole lot of official source material on the Soul Imperium. It's kind of this black hole mystery of what really went on there. Remember, this is thousands of years ago. I don't imagine they have the kind of heraldry we have today.
Okay.
I think of it more, and the way that Sean K. Reynolds is that houses had symbols, but they didn't have coats of arms like we conceive of it today. And the way I've talked with Anna about this before is the way I see it is that the formalization of heraldry really came with the Great Kingdom, and that was really more of a mishmash of concepts and need from the warlike Iridians coming together with the Sul in Keelland. And then the same thing basically happens out with the Ardi, right? And then what happened is you have this big fat army in the Great Kingdom marching out with their standards and their heraldry and all their regimentation, and they're taking over, and they're saying, and people kind of see that, oh, I want to be part of the power structure. I need to get me, registered as a noble and get a coat of arms, and that's kind of how that spreads around. And now that the Great Kingdom is disintegrating and the Kyosh Empire has contracted, there's all these little things on the edge where people are seeking legitimacy by claiming nobility, and that by extension that means they're claiming arms, either making them up or claiming an old coat of arms that's fallen into disuse and trying to puff themselves up, so to speak. And so there's a lot, like if you go into real world heraldry, English heraldry is very regimented. There's rules, there's regulations. You can literally go to jail for misusing arms. At some point in the history there, you might still go to jail for misrepresenting arms in England. I think there are laws.
Yeah.
Whereas like France, it's a little more loosey goosey.
Yeah, Sweden don't have hardly any formal. There's no laws against it. Yeah, it's more like a touristy thing. Cities and places have heraldry, and they even create modern heraldry just as a tourist thing to put on the road sign saying this is the cool little place you can stop over for finding this.
Right.
Yeah,
and that is kind of post World War One, when everything kind of exploded in terms, and the various revolutions that happened throughout the history, that World War II wiped out all the German nobility essentially.
Yeah,
and so there really isn't a the stuff there is mostly civic. It's actually a government bureau now that has the control over it. It's not like the monarchy has tradition and control in England. So they're very, very different. And so like for me, if you're doing 576 CY Great Kingdom that's in its disintegration phase, you could probably get killed for misappropriating someone's arms if you're inside the Great Kingdom.
Yep.
Right. But if you're in Greyhawk and you're claiming to be someone from the Great Kingdom, I don't know if anyone's going to expend a whole lot of effort to hunt you down unless you really go into town, like claiming, kinship with the Emperor or something. Yeah. Then maybe an assassin will show up on your door and kind of sort you out. But I think a lot of people aren't stupid enough to do that, and they'll find some minor noble house that's been extinct, and claim that.
So Bavix is asking what the official heraldry of the Knight Protectors is. Is that the sun?
I'm showing it on screen right now.
Oh
yeah, if you put that up, officially there's never ever been an official arms that was ever given. Yep. The one that you're about to see is something I made up.
A bunch of suns.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So that's called a semi, kind of seeded. And so if you the most famous of that would be like the fleur de lis pattern on blue, the yellow fleur de lis in a pattern. It's called a semi, where they're just spread out like seeds or something else.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that arms that I created, you see the Knight Protectors there? I created that because I wanted something that tied it to the kingdom.
Yeah.
And that's just the shield. Now, if you see the full-on arms I did for that, where they have the knight's collar, the chain, and all the stuff I did with that, it looks even better.
Oh yes, this is just the field mark, so to speak. How they actually this is not the herald. This is what you will see on knights or shields from.
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Not the full heraldry. Yep.
Right, and you might see like different orders, different groups within the Knight Protectors might have like something in the chief across the top that'll be. You have the semi-field down below, and then there'll be like their own little twist on it across the top. Mm-hmm. But you'll know that semi-field means it's part of the Knight Protectors. And woe to the person that tries to appropriate those arms inappropriately.
That's the intellectual property of the fantasy world, so to speak.
Well, of that particular organization.
Yeah.
And if they're still around, they're going to protect it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to let you use that if you don't actually have the rights to it. But the key point is that it should tie into the Imperial arms, because the story that I've read is that the Knight Protectors were not some noble organization originally. What it was is one of the old emperors was traveling through the land, and he was ambushed, and these farmers and townsfolk rose up and defended him at great cost to themselves. And he then ennobled those farmers and townsfolk that survived and made them his knight protectors. And then the knight protectors, essentially, they were a meritocracy. You had to earn your place.
Yep.
Being a noble, that may have given you an advantage on learning all the stuff you needed to be a knight, but that didn't get you into the knighthood. They had a high bar you had to hit, which is why they're kind of the Arthurian story of Greyhawk. They're the knighthood that everyone looks up to, despite their fall. That came with the Death Knights and the slow disintegration of the Great Kingdom.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Knight Protectors is an interesting organization, and all knighthoods essentially attempt to ape or emulate them.
Yeah.
Or at least try to get their honor rubbed off on them.
Yeah. We have a good question from Bavix. Do the 11 sons have a meaning?
No, okay. So here's the thing about heraldry. So when you're dealing with a semi of, which means just a scattering of, the number means nothing. Semi just means that you have a number in an even pattern across the shield.
So it's more like an artistic, just to look patterny.
It's just it's a pattern, essentially. So if you look at ermine, so if you look at Nyron's arms, those white sections with those little ermine marks.
Yeah.
Okay,
Brian, I think you're a little bit too close to your mic sometimes. We get spikes.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It's okay. Yeah,
all right.
Please go on.
So ermine is essentially a semi of those ermine spots. We just call it ermine because it's the specific thing that has a specific name, and the number of those spots can actually change, based on how much space there is on. So like if I were to quarter the shield and put the semi in the upper corner and the lower corner and have something else on the other two, those semis wouldn't be 11 suns in there. It would just be however many suns fills up that space to show the pattern. So there isn't really a meaning to that. Don't look for, and that's the other thing about it. It's like heralds real world heralds would sometimes do inside jokes with the stuff on there, but a lot of times, and there might be some symbolic meaning to that, but not everything on the heraldry had symbolic meaning. You had to do individual arms for individual people, and sometimes you were just looking to figure out what can I do that looks distinct so that it doesn't look like someone else's arms.
Yeah,
right. And they're
they're Great Kingdoms would be just like you're talking about doing individual arms, just so many characters and orders and things just in the Viridian areas. You can work on that forever.
Well, yeah. So Anna has her campaign set in Alyssa post Greyhawk Wars, and she has a bunch of arms she's created.
Yeah.
And she we kind of talked back and forth, and so she wanted me to kind of come in and help design a couple things for her because there's a lot to do there. I mean, I could probably fall into a rabbit hole and spend 2 years doing nothing but Great Kingdom coats of arms.
Yep.
Because there would just be so many. There's such a long history there.
Between Anna or you, Brian, how many have you created?
How many have I created? Whole cloth?
Yeah, roughly whole cloth.
I can't take credit for the shield I did for Mordenkainen because that was actually based off of the blazon that Gary wrote. But the one I just did for Hardby is all me. There was some stuff I never published that was the Greyhawk militia that I was experimenting with. I never really liked it, so I never published it because it just wasn't coming together. It was too cutesy. I was trying to do too many things that to kind of it looked like I was trying to make it all match, and it was all match, and it just didn't think. So I created something for that, but I'm just not satisfied with it. And then I did this Knight Protectors piece. anything else that I can think of where I just created something out of the blue?
So a few though.
A few. My
Few.
own arms.
I was just kind of looking for a rough number.
Yeah, maybe 4 or 5. I've just created whole cloth because there just isn't anything there, and I needed something. You know.
For your map, Anna.
Yeah, for my own on the public map, I've done a few, but they are like the city of Stowing. They're done from description. People have told me what it's supposed to be on it. But then on my personal campaign map, I'm somewhere between 20 and 30 different ones. I've done all the provinces of the United Kingdom of Alyssa, some of the North Kingdom ones, and I've done a whole bunch of others for various. I've done a whole bunch of them, and some of them they actually made it onto the map that I kind of added because it was kind of not that many in Grand March, and I did Knight Protectors, and there are a few of them that for the city of Pelak and stuff like that. They were described to some degree in the LG material, so I kind of have added and refined them a little bit. So but probably about 30 I've done for my own campaign. And there's more to come. So I have probably another dozen or so that are on the sketching stage that I have some basic ideas and stuff. So I'm putting more and more because I just love to have heraldry on the map, and I also love to have these symbols when we game, so you can actually roll knowledge nobility and see if you can know what it is when you see it. So yeah.
And to answer Gary's thing here, where he says there was actual cannon arms, sure,
some crazy combination.
There was one that I found that I had previously on the map that I replaced with yours, and that was you had the knights, the son of the Great Kingdom, and then there was the symbol of Hextor and Hieronymus on the sides.
Right.
I don't know where that came from, but
that was originally fanon and then eventually got published, and so you could say it's canon, but it slipped in there. It was never, they had never established it. Gary certainly never established it. It wasn't even established in From the Ashes. That didn't come till much later. If you can show me a source that predates Living Greyhawk for those arms that isn't fanon,
that would be fantastic.
I would love to see that because I have not found that. Yeah. Anyway, but this is the fun part where we argue about what.
Yes, and we have some more. Yeah, I got lots of heraldry, probably about 40 or so on my map that I got from various sources from the. So that's awesome. Our Draco, that's perfectly. I got a whole bunch of them for Bandit Kingdoms, and I've got some from Pol Luby, and I got for the Pomarsh area for the tribes down there. But those weren't actually the Pomarsh that I got from Pol Luby. They were not drawn. They were just text examples, like this is the thing and that and some ideas, and then I simply created things for it, so to speak. So I created about I think it's like 10 or 12 of them down there.
And frankly, your maps on are kind of a monster in terms of its need for graphics.
Exactly. I just wanted it. I thought it was so cool to have the heraldry on the map. So this is missing. And even if I haven't campaigned in an area, I added stuff there. And a few of them have kind of made it to the public map. So yeah.
Right. And that's great. Not everything is going to be me. I just can't produce it fast enough. I'm hoping to start producing more on a more regular basis.
That would be fantastic.
Again, I am one person. There is a huge whole wide world. And I think what I'm going to basically do is try to provide some guidance on motif. But, frankly, here's the thing is, and I'll just say this, is Greyhawk, your Greyhawk campaign is your Greyhawk campaign. And if you don't like something I or Anna or Mike or Gary or Gary Gygax or even Gary Holland, who's in the chat right now, throw it out, put what you need.
Yep.
It's your
That's the
campaign.
Idea. Yep.
You're right. Or if you like something we do and you want to use it, that's awesome. I'm glad to have helped you out.
Yep.
And I'm sure the rest of us are the same way.
Yep.
It's like, remember the law. I'm going to just reiterate this. It's something I said in the previous conversation I had with DM Shane is lore doesn't mean jack all to your players until they interact with it. Right. And if you can't present the lore in some way that they are going to either understand or want to interact with, the easiest way to interact with it is the lore comes and kills your player character's kitty cat. Now they want to know everything about who that person is, who their allies are, and they're going to go get some payback. I can write all the fun big dissertations. I'm a history major. I love this stuff personally, but it's the lonely fun, and it doesn't mean anything to your players until they can interact with it. If I write all this backstory and it's just for me, what is that?
I would say for me it works like it's the one of the guidelines for my own creativity is the background when I'm doing campaign, and it's also the kind of the seasoning of the adventures, meaning it's the thing that can make the adventure deeper and more interesting, but it's not really necessary from a player perspective, but it adds flavor to it. So some players can simply ignore it and go out and kill what they're supposed to feel like they want to kill anyway, and to get the story forward, and don't care much about it. So some people some players might be more interested.
The interesting thing about lore is that it can provide a internal logic to your adventure that makes it hold together. But the story that you're telling with your players, and you are telling to your players, and they're telling to you, this back and forth, is something that's always in flux, something that's ever changing. And one of the things I try to not do is get too cutesy and too deep with my lore that I can't react to what they're doing, because I'll tell you, my players have come up with so many better ideas than I ever could, and I'm more than willing to take credit for those ideas and say, that was it all the time.
Exactly. Just steal them and go with them. So the best players are the ones that tells you what to send trouble to send their way. So
or they find a tangent off of this idea you had that you thought was going to be really awesome, and you said, but that's even more awesome, and that's going to have bigger payoffs, and they're invested in that. I'm going to go with that. And you want to have some structure, but you don't want to overstructure yourself to the point where everything just grinds to a halt. I think that's the best advice I can offer, and I'm trying to do the same thing with heraldry. Like there are some things like I would love to just jettison the Duchy of Ernst arms and replace it with something more heraldic, that doesn't offend my heraldic sensibilities. But I'm not going to do that, because that's established. That's something that is just there, and I'm going to have to grit my teeth and just deal with it. And that's fine. And other people, quite frankly, just because it makes my teeth grind, there's other people that love it, right? And they think it's the best thing ever. And I'm like, okay, that's the juice for you. Awesome. Go for it. So that, those are kind of that's my philosophy on heraldry. Is I want to give people the best options. I want to try to maybe educate them a little bit about what it means. One of my favorite things is I created the 3rd edition kind of Living Greyhawk version of the Principality of Ulik, which is that red axe on a white shield. It's pretty stark. It's different from the quartered arms that shows up on that has that axe on it, but shows it's quartered arms, and it has gold and purple and white and red, and it's pretty busy, and it's the one that shows up on the World of Greyhawk box set and the folio. That arms is interesting. So but the new one was like pretty stark and pretty beautiful. And I said, well, what are we going to do with it? So I put these 2 golden celestial badgers as supporters. And then I put this flaming crown on top with this blue salamander. And I didn't explain the blue salamander. I just thought it looked really, really cool. And then someone asked me, well, what does the blue salamander mean? I said, well, what do you think it means? I intentionally put that in there as kind of a mystery, because I didn't want to explain everything. And that if that sparks your imagination, if that piece of heraldry gives you an adventure hook, that's awesome. I think that's great. And I shouldn't constrain you from what you think it is and tell you what it means. So
we have an interesting from Peace Medgar, Gary Julian in chat, that is he's encountered the tech elements that Gary Gygax put in there, and and going so that's an interesting thing. Brian, what's your take on tech in Greyhawk?
I go back and forth on that issue.
Ooh.
I guess it really depends on what year you're talking to me.
Okay, so Greyhawk kind of evolves into a technological future.
And I've kind of gone back and forth on this. I mean, let's face it. So, and this is going to kind of tie into what I talk about when we shift into Hardby, because we'll talk about the historiography.
Yep.
Essentially, I'm a history major, so get ready for some pedantic, boring stuff. All right, so the original campaign, when we were in original Dungeons and Dragons, the 3 little booklets, and then the Greyhawk supplement, Blackmore, all that, things were pretty fast and loose, right? I mean, Greyhawk had this prohibition on gunpowder. That was Gary's thing, because he wanted Renaissance-like cultural stuff, but he didn't want the firearms. He felt like that, that's what wizards were for. And so that was kind of his, Arneson went a different direction. But, Gary also did Isle of the Ape and Magic Mirror and all the Funhouse stuff. And they went to Barsoom, and there were guns there.
Yeah, and Barrier Peaks and
well, that's getting into the official stuff. I'm talking about when they were developing D&D. Yeah. They were all over the map. They were, they were going to Lankamar. They were just having a blast. But, copyright is what it is, and you can't publish that stuff. And so they kind of dialed it in, and they started doing it. So Barrier Peaks, to me, I've never got to speak to Gary, and I certainly couldn't ask anyone that was involved in that. That has kind of struck me as kind of an homage to like Metamorphosis Alpha and Blackmore, and that's fine. If you want the whiz bang shoot 'em up version, the kind of more pulpy version of Greyhawk, that's awesome. Not everyone has to be Call Sergeant Dark, Warhammer-ish Greyhawk, or the Funhouse Mirror version of Greyhawk, which Castle Greyhawk originally was. I'm talking about Gary's Funhouse dungeon, not in the sense that it had Funhouse mirrors and clowns. It's more of that. You went into the dungeon to have an experience, and there was a lot of stuff in there that, if you really looked at the logic of it, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why is there a dragon deep in the bowels of this dungeon? How did it get there? Right? What is all this stuff? And it was just, they were cranking that stuff out. Now, when you publish something, that's different. When the TSR published something, that becomes its own thing. So, in one sense, Barrier Peaks basically says, yep, technology, aliens exist. And if you want them in your world, there's your doorway. If you don't want them, you can do what Malden did, which is basically have the reactor core of Barrier Peaks go, critical, and it's now a big radiation zone that kills people when they walk through it. And there is no Barrier Peaks, and that's his answer to it. For me, I don't know. I haven't run Barrier Peaks since the 80s. When I ran a couple parties through it, and they had a blast, but I don't think that's really what I would focus on. In my own campaign right now, I certainly wouldn't be adverse to it. I just saw the 5th edition. You have this one too, Anna, is the Kowalsha venture that they just did for charity.
Yes. Yep.
And I liked the take they did with that.
Yep.
Where they instead of it being this alien ship that landed, it's more of this
planar
planar ship, and there's tech from other worlds. And
they did a fantasy version rather than a sci-fi intrusion. So I really like
that. I like their take on Kowalsha. He's this kind of mad scientist gnome, and you're not really sure.
Yeah.
If he's the original.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was well done. A lot of good art, and
really good.
I think that's a great interpretation of it. And if you don't like the Power Blaster, full-on sci-fi experience, I think that's a great compromise. If you still want to have those fantastical elements and the whiz bang, and you just can't stomach the sci-fi in it. But yeah, I mean, I guess right now I don't have a clear opinion about what I would prefer in my own campaign. I guess it would really depend on what my players were looking to do. Like if I certainly would do it as a one-off at the very least if someone wanted to go through it. Now, would I tie it into a greater campaign? Probably not. That's just not. That isn't something that really interests me, and it certainly isn't a region that I tend to base my adventure stuff out of. So, yeah. That's. I hope that my roundabout way of saying sure, why not? If it's your cup of tea, go for it.
Yep. I was thinking. Sorry.
One thing. So Merlin is a different thing. Again, you could reconceive that, so you can do this whole thing where he has a field around him, which I think was kind of Mona and maybe even Gary's. I don't remember who came up with the idea that there's this exceptional field around Merlin that allows an actual 6-gun to function. The other way you could say it is that they essentially are a magic missile wand that essentially looks like and acts like a gun, but the reality is it's magic, and that's what he's doing. That's another interpretation you could go there with it. Or if you want to take Matt Mercer's from Critical Role, his gunslinger class, and you want to say people that really, really follow this have been able to create magical powder to fire an actual projectile weapon. Sure, why not? You could do that. That's the kind of Greyhawk you want to have. That class is a great way to limit that, because they literally have to create the weapon themselves, and that would be part of your piety towards that particular hero deity, I guess. There's a lot. Again, if you're doing 5th edition, I mean, if you're in Pathfinder, they have essentially they have their own class for that.
Exactly. Pathfinder already had that officially incorporated.
It really did. Again, I think this really comes down to is what kind of game do you and your players want to play? I don't think there is one style fits all Greyhawk.
Sure.
What Mike
hardwired it.
What Mike likes to run or what you like to run is very different potentially from what I want to run. We'll have similarities. We have a commonality, and then it's Greyhawk, and there'll be certain tropes that we're going to all use. But the look and feel is probably going to be pretty different from table to table, and that's great. I think there's room for that in Greyhawk. I think people get way too binary sometimes, where it's all ones and zeros, yes and no, canon, not canon, and I think you need to kind of the world isn't binary. I'll take this into kind of very psychological terms. That's a very lizard brain way to think about the world, and it's not a great way to live. The world is much more subtle and shades of gray, and there's room for a lot of stuff in there, and if you're open to it. And I think that is a much better way to run your campaign. I was just reading somewhere where someone goes, that classic argument of, can you have evil players in your campaign? And then the guy say, no, they're just seeking attention. They're ruining everybody's fun. And I said, well,
you mean evil characters? Yeah,
evil characters. And I said, no, that's a binary way of thinking about alignment. I've never loved alignment to begin with, but I think I'll never do it justice. There's a great video. I'll see if I can get the link to Anna so she can throw it up in there. Matt Colville does a beautiful video on the concept of different types of characters you can play with evil alignments and how they can work with a party. And how with the right group of people, how and let's face it, in the original campaign, Robolar wasn't some mirror double. Rob Kuntz turned his character evil because he wanted to use the regalia evil that he found, and Robolar was evil. Okay, let's not sugarcoat this. All right,
but all kind of most players and myself included go through that phase when we want to go out and bash everything without thinking about the consequences.
I have played through Hamlet as an evil party, and we razed it to the ground. Yes, we've all done that.
And it can kind of be a relief at times. So I've certainly allowed. I have nothing against the evil characters in my campaigns.
But there's also some really good storytelling you can do. Like Rastlin from Dragonlance is a character who is evil, right? Let's just, people can talk about that guy and say, well, he turned. No, he was evil. All right. The only reason he was adventuring with those people is his sibling was in the party and he wanted to take care of them. And then eventually his own morals came up against his need to take care of his sibling, and what won out. And so that was the tension and the great storytelling you could do, because now there was this decision point for the character, and that had consequences and meaning. Now, I think that if you go and play an evil character and you don't have conversations with your fellow characters and the fellow players and the DMs, and you're just being a punk and killing people and stealing from them, that's going to end terribly.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're an anti-hero or even an anti-villain, which is another concept, like I said, go see this thing that Colville did on this subject. I think it'll open your eyes.
Yes.
I think it will open your eyes to the possibility of something like that. And there is room for that at your table with the right kind of people.
I agree with Ryan Glade. Is Rary really a traitor?
Yeah. That's interesting. Comment. Yeah.
and I also agree with Fox Bellevue there. Some of my friends' best characters were the ones that were like lawful evil. They're still obey laws and can get along in a group, behave. They just
but I've seen neutral evil characters do that. And even chaotic evil doesn't mean you're crazy.
No.
Right?
No.
See, this is the trap that people get into, is they think chaotic neutral means the person's crazy. No, they're just very self-interested.
Yeah.
They might even be narcissistic, but really, if they have Mad Max is not a good person, right? The Max from the Mad Max series is not a good person. All right, he is not a hero, but when his interests align with yours, he will go to the wall for you. And he will adventure with you.
Yeah.
So the trick is not whether you can adventure with these people, but it's how long and how do you keep the story tension correct, so that that they have a reason to be there.
Yeah, Brian, we need to have you on for a whole alignment in Greyhawk show in the future here. Yeah, but now I want to. Please go on.
Cut that one really short. I hate alignment. I really, really do. I think it's one of the things I'm super happy about in 5th edition is that it's a choice. It really doesn't matter. I'm much more interested in the bonds and the flaws and all the other things that link you to the people that you're playing with and give you motivation. Alignment, and mechanically it doesn't mean as much in 5th edition, which I'm super happy about. I really, really dislike the fact that you could detect evil on someone, because it made for terrible storytelling. Oh, we have a paladin in the group. That whole line of play is gone. I cannot, or they have, or everyone has an amulet of obscure alignment, which is just like, come on, really? I mean, that's just now we're just in an arms race to see if I can actually do this thing. So anyway, the alignment.
So they're saying Rary. They're talking about Rary in chat, and I think he's not evil. I think he's just arrogant.
Oh.
I think thinks he's smarter than everyone else, more powerful than everyone else. So it's not that he's evil, he's just arrogant.
I technically would say that he's evil of some type, in the sense that he's not like twirl his mustache evil. He really thinks he's doing right by the world. Because remember, every good villain really has good motivation for doing what they do. Like Mr. Freeze from the Batman animated series, he will move heaven and earth if he thinks he can bring his wife back or do right by her. He really thinks he's the good guy.
Right, because if he were evil, he would not just blow up the conference. He could have blew up the city.
Right. I mean, he certainly could have done a better job of killing everybody. I mean, whatever his motivation was, and that was never really clear to me.
No.
this is one of the reasons so
Ryan Gilliard's right.
Brian's other bugbear about, and this is good. We should segue off of this into Hardby, because this will come.
Yes.
Into
that.
Okay.
I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
please.
Here's the thing that bothers me about the Greyhawk Wars, is that the Greyhawk Wars box set basically does all this stuff, this huge amount of change, and the play. And by the way, I remember you guys were talking about what happened to. From Howl of the North and the Swords adventure, what happened to the third one of that got subsumed into the Greyhawk Wars box set, because they were going to do that third one, and then they decided to Greyhawk Wars, and they took the partially written manuscript for the third module and brought it over into Greyhawk Wars. And what they did is here's the adventure idea. Now we're just going to just do the logical conclusion, and we'll take it all the way through. This is why I really like DM Shane's thing, where he's like having his characters experience the Greyhawk Wars. They're going to have an effect on it. Their version of the Greyhawk Wars is going to be very personal. And that world on the other side is going to be very different from the world that we wound up playing Living Greyhawk in, because they're going to have a chance to affect the outcome.
Yep.
And I think that was the one thing I really disliked about From the Ashes and the Greyhawk Wars, is that they made all these changes and I didn't get a say in them as a DM or a player. And they were just thrust upon me. And some of them were excellent. They had some great ideas, and some of them was like, why did that have to happen? I know Anna says, why did they wipe out the Horn Society? I love those guys.
Exactly. That was one of my favorite villains, and I was so sad to see them go. So, yep.
Right. Now, don't get me wrong. Carl Sargent, amazing content producer.
Yep.
Did some amazing things. I like Carl Sargent. Mm-hmm. I think Night Below is probably one of the best adventures ever.
And I Use the Evil and stuff. They're fantastic. Yep.
Yeah. I think I think in the stuff that they did in the Ayuz lands post wars that Roger Moore had to kind of fix, which caused we get into the Crook Around, the Flight of Fiends, because you had to be this tall to adventure in the lands of Ayuz, because if there was demons running around and you were going to die if you weren't at a certain level. It was just you had no chance. And it meant that you couldn't event. It was trying to get Blackmore.
Yep.
You either had to go the long road,
or in the box set, Ayuz was bad. But going by what's just in that box set, it's just like orcs and things.
Yeah.
Not until second edition does it get really bad.
Yeah. It was kind of they upped their game significantly.
Yeah, where you had the demons everywhere, and that was a cool idea, but it was terrible for doing low level adventures. Mm-hmm. But like I said, so that's my big bugaboo. So let's shift to Hardby and let's kind of talk about that.
Can we do a segue in between, because I want to have a little shift in between, and then we start Hardby in a few minutes, because I want to first ask Mike what he's been up to lately.
Oh, and I'm sorry, Mike.
No, yeah.
Okay, guys. So I'm still working on the last page of the Castle Greyhawk comic. That's castlegreyhawk.blogspot.com for those who haven't seen it yet. Mm-hmm. Or you can maybe get to it through the links on my own blog, Greyhawkery. Other than that, I try to update the blog once or twice a week. Beyond that, I don't think I have any special Greyhawk projects going on. I could be drawing a blank. We're trying to bring back my old comic strip in a couple different formats. I know Brian's got it going on the Facebook group, Cannon Fire group. And, who knows? Maybe I'll get the entire run back up and going so you can binge read. It's a lot of stuff.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to that. I've been collecting them, Brian, as you posted them on the Greyhawk, the Cannon Fire Facebook group, and so I'm collecting them and putting them in so I can sit and read them one after the other. So that will be awesome.
Oh yeah, I actually have them in a OneNote file because I've been slowly but surely archiving them. Mm-hmm. One of the projects I need to do when I get a moment of time is to do a character index of all the gods and characters that have shown up so far.
Oh,
because
awesome.
Mike, who was the person that did the original one of those for you on the website? There was beautiful thing where like they had these great alignment things, where they came up with punny ways to talk about what their alignments were based off of the like LG.
Was that Scott Casper back then too? That helped you
no,
with that?
it was another person. Just a second.
Now I'm drawing a blank. Sorry.
1 second.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Back to alignment.
Yeah. No. This was the one thing I liked about alignment. So.
Yeah. Anyhow, around this time every year, I used to do a Need Fest special for Greyhawk Comics.
Will we get one this year too?
No.
Damn, we don't get a Need Fest special.
You'll get a Castle Greyhawk comic and like it. But yeah. All my Need Fest comics used to have evil bents to them, though. That's what I used to like.
It was Wolfsire.
Wolfsire. Go Wolfsire.
God, who I haven't seen in a bazillion years.
The old Cannon Fire.
Forgot the names, but now it rings a bell when I hear it. So, yeah.
So, like, Mayheen has a listing of alignment LG, and in parentheses says Lady Guardian, and then the portfolio. Yep. Yeah,
now it's coming back to me.
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. And
see?
So, yeah, it's. I want to basically take what Wolfsire was doing and just kind of update it for what we're doing on the Cannon Fire site, so the people that want to like understand who all these characters are, because sometimes you don't actually say who those characters are in the comics.
No. Eventually I did, and then the written content then started to outweigh the artwork content.
I'm actually looking forward to getting through this next year's worth of
Neutral
comics.
Exhausted.
Neutral exhausted, yeah. I'm really looking forward to getting through this next year of comics, and we get into the third year, because that's when the cultists show up.
Oh,
yes. Yeah. So
gone but not forgotten.
Yep.
Oh, love the cultists. So
that's
much.
Cool. Yep.
I really hope you do some comics with them after Castle Greyhawk's done. Scott, see, I'm trying not to poach him right now. Honestly, don't come and kill me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love your blog, man. You always come up with something interesting to talk about. You always come at it at a different angle that I wouldn't necessarily think about it in.
A lot of cool analysis and stuff. It's great.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I like also the links. Like I've found several blogs off of your linked blogs.
Oh yeah, definitely. You're the one looking around the interwebs for all the cool.
I need something to talk about. Google Greyhawk.
Yes, and you must do that. Or how do you get all the because you find all the cool stuff and links to it. It's fantastic. I'm so narrow focused, but I'm shifting focus a little bit this now for my Need Fest special, so to speak. Yeah, so I've been working on the same damn map for 20 years, and everyone kind of recognized the satellite image kind of, it's supposed to what the world looks like. So I thought this year's special need to be something that I haven't done much before, only for my own campaign, but not published for the rest of the world. So I'm doing handout maps, like parchment style maps of Greyhawk. So there will be a whole big pile set of handout maps that my patrons will get for Christmas, and the rest of the world will get in like the end of January or February. This is spring, and they will be probably there will be about more than 10 different styles, and it will be everything from the whole subcontinent down to different areas and realms and stuff. And so I will chop it up to a whole bunch, so that I don't know exactly how many files it will be, but that's one of the major things that I'm working on right now. So that's the major Greyhawk thingy. And I'm also working on a secret project for one of Greyhawk fan that he's going to use in his campaign, and he was willing to pay me for it. So yeah, so that was interesting. So we'll see what he will do with that map, but it's a kind of an interesting experiment. So that's something. So but the main thing right now for me is the handout maps, because that's fun, and it's something I've only done a little bit, but it's a lot of Photoshop fun to create these kind of cool looking things. And also I'm trying to figure out how to best put chop it up into realms and stuff like that, various areas. So there will be kind of it's the 99 different realms in Greyhawk. If you count all the free cities and the big forests and stuff, it's about 100 different places. I will not do that many, but I will probably do at least 20, maybe even 30, and in 10 different styles. That would be a hell of a lot of files and stuff. So it's going to be, that's the big project right now, and hopefully I can will be done in the before Christmas. So that's the big thing now. And then Hepmona Land mapping is put on the back burner until this is done. And then next year, early next year, I might do some changes to my Patreon, just a little bit, and I have to ask my Patreon members about that, how they feel about it. I want to see if I can consolidate the three tiers down to two, to make it simpler and easier, and in a way cheaper, because I want more people to support the Patreon and have access to it, rather than maximizing the profit of each of them. So that's something I have to discuss with all the Patreon members, and they have to have a poll about that. So and then I have some other stuff coming up for next year that I haven't announced yet, that will talk to the patrons, but they will come soon. So there's now I'm working on Greyhawk like 3 days a week, or 3 days a week, which means that right now even more. So now I have a hell of a lot of time to sit and figure out, oh, this needs to be done, that needs to be done, and stuff. So there's a whole bunch of cool stuff that I'm kind of just getting into. And also I purchased a new version of Vue and Plant Factory. Those are really cool tools that I've been using, and I got a new version, and I was so eager, so I installed it and realized I screwed up a little bit, so I installed it a little bit better, and now I locked myself out, so now I can't use it. So that was kind of funny. It was an investment that kind of got itself screwed up right away. It's a French company, so I sent an email to their tech support and didn't get a response, and they didn't respond. So then they sent me an email 2 days later, say, oh, can you review the new product? And I was like, damn, you locked me out. So I sent them a review that was kind of nasty, a little bit, saying that we'll see if that kind of helps to get me unlocked again. But it's kind of funny. So sometimes I screw things up faster than nothing. But handout maps is the big thing that I'm doing, and
they're nice maps.
Yeah, and hang on a second, I have some things that I can show here, I think. So while we're doing here, I'm going to go in here and see if I can show some of the, yeah, we have some handout maps. I'm going to show things like this. So there will be parchment styles, and we have other things here, so we can have
oh yeah,
yeah.
I tried to draw that exact map once.
Okay, yeah,
yours looks a lot better.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I have various different ones. So you can have and then we can have this style, and we can have this style, and there will be like on leather, and there will be like on stone, and there will be like someone scratched it with a pen, and there will be charcoal, kind of smudgy versions for when they're screwed up, so to speak. And this is another one, kind of more the one. This is the kind of map I guess you will find in a stronghold of someone who's really rich and want to have the best perfect map that a cartographer in Greyhawk would do. Then it will look maybe something like this. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Here's another one, little smudgy version. So these style of maps, so to speak. And
I really like that you put in all the work now to do super accurate maps, and now you can actually work backwards from that and do artistic.
Yep. Screw it up a bit. So yeah, and these are just the first. I just did a bunch of experiments that they will be more refined than these, the final things. So but this kind of these kinds of maps that you can use as handouts for the players to find out. Yeah. And so this is the kind of map they will buy in game. So yep. So that's my main focus. So that will be for the Need Feds presents for my patrons, and then it will be for everybody in during spring.
Cool.
I like it.
Oops. Yeah. Now we have some issues. We have changed place here a bit. So while you're talking, I'm going to yeah, I'm going to move you hang on a
Hey,
second.
while we're waiting, Brian, do you happen to have a copy of the World Greyhawk guide on you?
You talking about the box set?
Yeah, that.
This thing?
Pop quiz. Whose heraldry is that on that flag?
Oh, on the banner?
Yeah.
That would be Gygax's, to tell you the truth.
Oh, good answer.
Oops. Yeah. Hang on a second. Now we're going to.
I mean, I don't know if that was the original intent. I know that that is a variation of the town of Fax, I believe.
So you have put some thought into it. I just was guessing. I was just asking out of the blue.
No, that's the arms that Gary Gygax's family is actually using.
I'll be darned.
For Gary. In fact,
so easily didn't just pull that out of.
Well, I don't. Again, because I'm not Grodog or Joseph Block,
Sure.
I haven't talked with the original people involved, so I don't know the genesis of that. Whether that was actually arms before.
I'm sorry for the video issues here. It's meet up.
We're rolling with it.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
At least that's a little bit better. Now I'm just going to move you
well,
around
anyhow,
a bit.
I would have guessed it was random.
No, it's actually it's the same. Jeff Easley also did the cover for the DMG, and that's the same shield as the fighter that's on that one for the first edition Dungeon Masters.
Wow, I never even noticed.
With the one with the Afridi on the cover with them. Yeah.
Now I gotta go look.
Yep.
I'm going to move you in here a bit.
I'll be damned.
Yeah. Yep.
Never even noticed.
And if you look at the Gary Gygax Memorial, that's the coat of arms they use for that. And so I think that there isn't like a College of Arms officially here in the United States. There's one up in Canada, obviously, but I think they may have trademarked it. That might be the Gygax coat of arms here in the U.S. Now, the provenance of that, whether that was just something Jeff Easley did and Gary liked it and just adopted it, or whether that was something Gary had before and Jeff Easley saw it and put it in, I can't tell you. I don't know that story. And I certainly have not talked with people that would be in the know of that. So, but I do know that particular arms has shown up in several different pieces of TSR art, and that it is most definitely associated with Gary Gygax. So history lesson done. Have we got the pictures all fixed?
Yep. Yeah, on this one. Now it's no, it actually works there. So perfect. Yep. So
okay,
now it
perfect.
works. Mm-hmm.
All right. So
I'm sorry about that for everyone, all the viewers here, that it was kind of a screwed up a little bit. That's the first time it happened on the show. I've seen it happen on other Twitch shows, so that's something that happens from time to time. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now Hardby, exactly.
Oh, we're back on Hardby. Okay,
yes.
cool.
For those who just arrived, like Bloody Jackal. First half we talked about heraldry, alignments, and things, and now we're going to talk about the
Barrier Peaks, Merlin. I mean, we were kind of all over the place, and I had no notes for this. This is all riffing off the top of my head, folks. So take that with a huge heaping grains of salt, please. And okay, so let's talk about Hardby.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of where I'm going to go into my training as a historian. And one of the classes you take in college is called historiography, which is where you study your sources to better understand their biases and to understand the era in which they were written. Because it's not enough to read something, you have to understand the context that you're reading it from. Right?
History is written by the victors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even more is mores and meanings of words change. So, for instance, despot, right? Mike, what comes to your mind when I say the word?
Evil.
Power. Someone who holds power over
the ultimate
others.
ruler in a way, or someone. Yeah.
Right.
Hardby. Yes.
But that's a modern interpretation of the word. It front loads the connotations for that. So a despot in its original form was merely a noble title in the Byzantine Empire for a prince of the Byzantine Empire. So it has a different meaning in that context as a historian. So let's just talk about the Despostrix, right? So I was trying to figure out what I went on this huge journey of trying to figure out what is a Despostrix, and what I understood and finally realized is that Gary took despot and just threw the Latin tricks on it to kind of feminize it.
So it's not a word.
It's not a real word.
No,
it's not even a real title in the real world.
Brilliant.
No, but it's awesome to have it because now it is a cool title. That makes it more fantastic or fantasy. Yeah.
But what it does is Gary liked to play with words. We all know this. I mean, the reason I have the vocabulary today is I read all the first edition manuals, and there are words in there that I had never seen before. I had to go look stuff up in the dictionary.
Yeah, I remember
or
when
the encyclopedia.
I remember when I shocked my English teacher in like 6th grade or something. That's I knew what olfactory was, and she didn't. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I was dyslexic as a child, and so the fact that I could spell certain words because of the game Traveler, and because of D&D, my dad was happy as a clam because I struggled with spelling all my life. And so anyway, we'll kind of come back to this whole thing about the Despostrix, is that, the modern connotation of despot would mean that she's kind of this overbearing ruler with complete control, and kind of the modern idea of a despot. But that really isn't how they've been portrayed or how we think of them in reality. So to me, it was like, well, did Gary really mean this old original meaning? And if he did, and folks, I have absolutely no idea. I've never had that conversation with him or anyone that was around at the time that could have known. And I'm just saying, this is me just speculating off of the wordplay. Is that if he really meant that this was someone who was a prince, some type of royalty related to the emperor, well, what if the Despostrix was a title assumed by the Gynarchs there to say that they had a relationship with the noble family, the ruling family of the old Suluise Empire? Whether that's true or not, right? I'm just saying is that's something, that title is meant to confer a certain gravitas to their leadership, a certain history, so to speak. And that changes how you see that word, right? So this is how, when I'm talking about the historiography of something, where you kind of look at the context in which it was meant. Now, do I know that that's what Gary meant? No, I don't. All right. Could Gary have just been saying, no, these people really are actually despots, and I'm just going to make a female despot, and that's my wordplay? Could have very well been that. I don't know. So I'm just saying is that this is why you kind of look at your source material. It's not enough just to read what's written, but you have to read when it was written. Yes.
I think you're right, Ranglade.
What?
Oh, he was Ranglade's saying something about despot being in the hierarchy between two titles, and so I quickly grabbed
you went to the
he's right.
But you also notice that in that hierarchy of titles, there's this thing called Grandee Despostrix. What it is I believe that a comma got left off of there, because Grandee is an actual title that comes from Spain, and it is a whole class of nobility. Essentially, it's a court title in Spain that essentially gives it's like you are of a different elevation of nobility within the Spanish court, and it gives you the right to be referred to as cousin by the Queen of Spain.
Ooh.
All right. And so you could be a duke or a countess or a knight, and if your family's a grandee of Spain, you are elevated above a whole group of other nobility, because you are in the tight circle, in the tight orbit of the Queen of Spain. So a grandee. So this is going to kind of come back to Gynarch. So the Gynarchs is this kind of this amorphous title that really has no meaning in the real world. It's something made up by Gary.
Monarchy.
Right, Gynarchy.
Yeah.
So, but it's become, and we'll see this when we kind of talk about the source material, and we're going to talk about, it's become an actual title, and it's become a group of nobles within Hardby, the Gynarchs. Okay. So if you think of the Gynarch as the equivalent of grandee in Spain, is then there's all these different levels. It's a level of nobility within the nobles of Hardby, potentially. Again, something to think about. I'm not saying this is what it is. I'm just saying these are things I'm toying with and thinking about.
Yeah.
So let's kind of just start with where this all is. So we have no information about Hardby prior to publication of the folio. Was that 1979 for the folio? I want to. It's
either 7980 or something like that.
So somewhere in there, 7980,
and then the box set.
I think it was actually 1980.
Okay, yeah.
The folio comes out. It's 1980. The folio comes out. That's the first time we've ever heard about Hardby, and it's a point on the map, and it's a brief reference in the city of Greyhawk listing, and essentially, at some point, the nobility of Hardby, and the nobility of Greyhawk, when there was still really useful nobles in control in Greyhawk, they intermarried, right? The Landgraf of Celatin, and one of the daughter of one of the despotrics or Gydarks of Hardby, they get married, and that kind of forms the bond. Even though they're rivals, there's this bond between those two cities. All right. So your first reference is here in 80 and 83. It's pretty vague. It's right now it's separate from Greyhawk. They pay tribute to them for some mutual defense. And that's about all we really know. The next source in that era from the first edition comes from Gary Gygax's Artifact of Evil.
Oh, now, Artifact of Evil. Okay, yeah, the second one.
Right. So this is where Deirdre Long. Oh, dang it! Give me a moment here. This is where I have a whole listing of NPCs from Hardby, and I just need to go to that because I can never say her name.
Yeah, I can't pronounce the Liachim the Learned. Liachim the Learned. Yeah,
it's Michael backwards.
Oh, okay, yeah. Confirmed that it was 1980. So, yep. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm doing some of this from the top of my head, and I don't actually have a full copy of the folio left. Mine just disintegrated and was lost in another move. Mm-hmm. I have the 83 box set, and quite frankly, that's more complete. There are a little bit.
Oh, look at that. Ooh, I don't have that. I only have it as a PDF.
So, you have the original printing of it.
I do?
Yeah. You see the titling on the front there?
Yeah.
That's not what it looked like. You also have the wizard there for the TSR wizard on there. That changes on the later published versions.
Oh, that is so cool.
Antique Roadshow.
Yep.
Woohoo! Unfortunately, those things are so banged up usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crusty.
Yeah. So basically, the brother and sister, though. What is it? It's the long something. Anyway, they're nobles from Hardby. They're followers of Alona. They meet up with Gord and his crew, and they intersect for a while, and then they separate. But Gary pretty much kind of treated the Gydarchy of Hardby as kind of a joke, where there are these people that they would be chauvinist in the other direction. Because the women are in charge, and they believe that they're the superior people, and he makes kind of a joke of it. And her character isn't terribly sympathetic, but you get a lot of information. They have knights. This is the first time we've heard of a knight of Hardby, because Deirdre is a knight, and at the end of the book, she becomes.
Oops.
Excuse me.
I think we lost your video, but it's okay. We have the audio. So,
I apologize. I'm
it's okay.
having some charging issues.
Yeah, but it's okay. We heard you. So
yeah.
There. I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, you're back.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, so she becomes a Justicar of Hardby at the end of the book in the epilogue, and
wow. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that is loaded meaning, and you can look at that in different ways. Because again, if you look at what Justicar means in the real world, we have really no idea what Gary meant by it. It just was a throwaway line. you can take that in a couple different directions.
Seems fairly common.
Yeah. This is very much Gary's style. Is he'll allude to something and then he just moves on.
Let someone else
beautiful.
justify it later.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then people would come and ask him about it. And then whatever mood he was in that day, he would tell you one story. Sometimes that story would change if someone else asked the question later. And that was one of the, I'll just do a quick segue here before we get back into the Hardby stuff, is that I've seen Rob's notes from when they shared the campaign from the El Raja Key archive.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, those things are nowhere near in publishable form. The kind of notes he kept, which is I'm assuming is similar to what Gary did, is they're very, very minimal. And they riffed a lot of stuff. They really didn't sit down there and lock themselves into a particular trait. They had an idea of what was supposed to go on, and there was some stuff in their head, but what the players did and how they reacted to it, and some of the stuff was just done on the fly. And you didn't have box text and complete description. There might be like a basic description of what's in the room, but how many? Sometimes not. And you'd have like a base idea of what was going on. So we'll kind of come back to this. So that was kind of Gary's style, is he would like show you something, but he wouldn't over explain it. Right. And you would get interested in it. That was the beauty. That's the thing that sucked me in about that original box set and the folio, is I'd read something and I go, I want to know more. Right. Well, what does that mean? And then you had to fill in the blanks. And that was the beauty of Greyhawk in the early days of it, before we started doing these big, long supplements.
So
anyway, Hardby. So we move along. So that's kind of like first edition, sources for the most part.
Who came up with the two brawling statues Ryan Glade's asking about?
I'm going to come to that a little bit later, because that's not going to be till.
Just remember
that's second edition.
Mm-hmm.
We're still in first. Okay.
Oh, we have to take this chronologically. So
I don't want to hop around. I'm going to lose my place.
Oh yeah.
Anna, can you pop up map 01 map and 02 map on the screen for me?
Okay. Then
I want to. This is something I want to talk about. So this is the Darling map from my 83 box set. It's the same map that was in the folio. And technically, it's the same map that's in From the Ashes, though they did a little bit of work on it there. So you're going to notice something if you zoom in on Hardby a little. Can you zoom in on that a little bit?
Sure.
Magnify,
please. Okay, yeah, perfect. So look at the symbol under Hardby there. Okay, see that little symbol? And so let's bring up the key there.
Yep, I'll bring in the key in front here. So now the and you see that's walled city. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now what that means is at least in the box set. So the folio had one set for the population size for the cities, and then that got transliterated into the box set. And then there was if you show me slide number 10, which is the errata from the Dragon magazine.
Okay. Let me show number 10 here. There we go. And I just need to do this. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. There it is. Okay. Perfect. So in number 10, the base size of a city is what, like 16,000 people?
Yeah.
In the original book. Okay. This is going to be in direct contradiction to what happens in second edition.
Uh-oh.
All right. They are going to retcon this. It's no longer a city. It's a town.
Yep.
Okay. I want you to see that if you're going to follow official canon, if this is going to be the source you use, you're going to shift off of what Gary originally intended with it, and just be aware. So for me, when I go to 576 to do my campaign in Hardby, I'm going to keep it a city. That's going to change how I do that particular location. It's not going to be the same as what Sargent and Roger Moore and all the other people that come after are going to do. I wanted to let you have that piece in your mind. Now, I personally think that Hardby is not as big as Greyhawk, so there's going to be a limit to how big I'm going to let it be. Right? I haven't determine the number that I want it to be. Anna, I know you on your map, so you can get rid of the
on my
errata.
map. Yeah, on my map, it used to be a large town, and then it moved up to a small city, and now it's a large city because we talked about this a few weeks ago, and we kind of moved it up to the scale so it will actually match the numbers from first edition, and that it's
but there's an interesting thing. Yeah. There's an interesting thing here is that this is where canon, or as I like to call them, published sources, tends to fail us, because there is you can't reconcile this discrepancy between the original source material and what comes after, and you're just going to have to make a choice.
Yep.
So whatever your choice is on it, whether it stays a town or becomes a city, small or large, totally up to you.
Yeah, I always want. And the funny thing is that I did that first on my own campaign maps. I moved it up to a large city, and then when we talked about it, and you said that it has that many, and then I was like, wow, that means that it is a large city. So now from the 2018 edition on the public map, I also gunned it up to so it's a large city now there too. So yep.
So.
Slipped by me.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it slipped by me. I never noticed the difference.
This is because I've been putting a microscope to this for my own. This is the kind of research that I do when I get into historian mode.
Yep.
And I just put a microscope to it, and I went, "This doesn't make sense." And I then try to figure out what it was, and I had a really bad the map that's in Puppets, and there's another place it's the black and white Darling map of the Woolly Bay area. However they did that printing, obscured what kind of symbol was under Hardby. It wasn't until I got to the original Darling map and magnified that on a phone and went, oh no, that's a walled city. I went, okay, that's the original. Right. So yeah, if anything I can teach you is look at your sources, right? And so, and I'm going to do one other caveat here is, I highly respect the work of Carl Sargent. I highly respect the work of Roger Moore, Eric Mona, Sean K. Reynolds. I think they're amazing content producers and authors. I'm just going to say, I think Hardby got the short end of the stick in a lot of things. And it started in my next thing, which is going to take us into second edition, which is the City of Greyhawk box set. And this is where historiography is going to become really important, because we just recently learned that Carl Sargent died back in August. Excuse me. Going to mute for 1 second.
Yep, this kind of shows how difficult it can be to research these things. That you have all sorts of contradictions. Please go on.
Okay, so we get to the City of the Greyhawk box set. Now, this is post Gygax's removal from TSR. This is let me look. I want to say 89, but I may be wrong. Nope, 1989. And Douglas Niles writes Gem of Flyness, which is the map and all of the coded locations. And we know from a missive after the death of Carl Sargent that's up on Malden's site, the co-writer, Rick Rose, talks about his experience doing Folks, Feuds, and Factions with Carl Sargent, which, by the way, this is the first officially work for TSR that Carl Sargent ever does, because Rick Rose, who'd been working for TSR UK, had been trying to get him work within TSR, and this was the first time. And if you go read that piece, you'll notice that Gem of Flyness had already been written by this other author, Douglas Niles. And then they had to fill in this Folks, Feud, and Faction. I think they had a weekend, maybe a little bit more. They went to this kind of chateau or kind of estate, had a lot of drinks, and they just started writing, and they banged this thing out. They had a very tight deadline. And at this point, I don't know if Carl Sargent had really been involved in Greyhawk. I don't know this one way or the other. But we've all read this, and it didn't seem to match up with some of the stuff that had come before. And one of the things that doesn't match up is they refer to Hardby as a town. And so that's kind of like the first shift it was subtle. They didn't really talk about there's no population of Hardby listed in this book, but they talk about the military stuff, because they took to mean is Hardby is paying this tax to Greyhawk for protection, and so they said, well, Hardby has militia down there protecting them, and that they don't have their own stuff. So remember I talked about the knights that exist? If there's knights of Hardby, they have their own military. They probably even have their own navy, right, to protect their merchant stuff. So for whatever reason, Sergeant and Rick and Douglas Niles have decided that Hardby, and then they come up with this thing where the Gyarchy really isn't in charge anymore. This coalition of merchants or whatever have taken over, and and so that's kind of where the genesis of that's starting to happen. And again, Hardby is kind of this appendage of Greyhawk. Greyhawk's the main focus of this. This is another thing, is when you're writing something about Greyhawk, it's like, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So, everything is going to talk up Greyhawk and town play everything else around it. And so that's kind of what happens there. And so that's the beginning of...
No, Justin, it's Hardby, it's short for Hardby.
It was originally Hardby, and then contracts into Hardby. Yeah. And we'll talk about that, because that actually doesn't show up until this is early second edition in '89, is this Greyhawk City box set. It isn't really until they decide, Sergeant gets a bunch more work after it. This was like his intro into TSR, and he gets a bunch more work off of this, and he's writing all kinds of stuff, and he's working for other companies as well. So let's get into my notes for second edition. One moment. All right. So let's see. What is my first source here? They talk about okay, so one more anecdote about, however you say the word. One more thing about the
Anecdote.
Yeah, anecdote. Thank you. So the Despot of Hardby is the title when they talk about Hardby, and they do not discuss her at all. It's all men and military. So you can, and that kind of is where their head was at. With, Carl Sargent was more about the military side of things. So there's an adventure in Dungeon 30 called Ghazal that involves the Gyarchy, but it really doesn't get picked up by anything else. It's an interesting thing to read. There's camels in it, which later the camels disappear from the Bright Desert, and because it's a dungeon adventure written by someone.
What's that title called again?
Ghazal, Ghazal, and it's in dungeon number 30. And essentially, what's happened is a noble of Hardby has been kidnapped by some dervishes from the desert, and your mission is to go retrieve her. All right. So the next thing comes, and that was 1991. Okay, so 2 years after the box set. So the next piece that comes out that deals with Hardby, because the Greyhawk Wars mention nothing about the Greyhawk Wars board game mentions nothing about Hardby. The next reference to that is going to be in 1992 with Carl Sargent writing From the Ashes. So, dun dun dun, and now everything is about the war, right? And one of the interesting things is that if you look at there are references in Dragon magazine when Carl is talking about the upcoming From the Ashes set, and one of the things he refers to Hardby as the military port of Hardby. Mm-hmm. So that gives you an idea of how he's conceptualizing Hardby at this point, which is it's an important military asset, and that's really all he sees it as. And he doesn't really describe this is where we get to the Hardby Marines and the heraldry for the Hardby Marines in From the Ashes. Hardby Marines are essentially a creation of the city of Greyhawk. They are a combination of Greyhawk militia and freed slaves from Safeton and other parts of the Wild Coast. And they are an outside force that have taken over Hardby along with the Mountaineer militia. And they form part of this ruling council. And again, we don't really. Oh, damn it! Sorry.
He's going.
Yep. There we go.
Yep. I may have to switch over to my computer because this thing is not keeping a charge. I don't know what's going on.
So Hardby is much more messed up than I realized.
Yeah, basically what it is that, Carl has this job to do, which is to talk about the war and what happened. And so everything is from that lens. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And so Hardby loses its own self because now it needs to be the deep water military
part of the domain.
Yeah,
right. It's part of the domain. It no longer has its own identity, and then we start to talk about again this merchant group. There's actually it's crazy. This is where we get the water rats who are not actually in Hardby but go down to it. We talk. We start to see a little bit more about Hardby, but we still don't have a map of it. We have really no idea what the government's like. They refer to it as a town, but we don't really given population. So it's just one thing after another. But we know exactly what the forces of the Mountaineer militia are composed of, and we know exactly what the Hardby Marines are composed of, and how good the morale is. Okay, so this is basically from the ashes. There is a rumor in from the ashes where there's the tar pits in the Mist March, and that if you can get these golden brown tar from it, you can sell a high price in Hardby. There's one interesting thing is that the rumors from Meyer Castle come to Hardby and Greyhawk, so Hardby can be a jumping off point to go to the castle. Yeah, it's interesting that the Duchy of Ernst, where it resides, doesn't really get much from it, but
Maybe I'm getting ahead of you here, but Hardby does have a high concentration of adventure module jumping points, doesn't it?
In first edition, yes, there was Ghost Tower of Inverness. Pits of Azak-Zil comes out in second edition early on. It's certainly first referenced in the hardback Greyhawk Adventures book. Right. It's never really distinctly placed other than it's southeast of Hardby, somewhere in the hills somewhere. And there is a dwarven port town that's abandoned that I can't remember the name of, that supports it. That
I'm sure it's on Anna's map.
Yeah, I'm zooming in on it right now here. So there we go.
Yeah, the problem is that there's been multiple locations given to the Pits of Azak-Zil. Yeah. I know Anna is putting it up in the actual mountain ranges of...
I did that first, but now I've actually moved it since our conversation. So I put it...
Oh, you have?
Yeah, you can see it on screen now. If you look at the stream, you'll be able to see where it ended up after our discussion.
So did you put it somewhere near the Starcairns? In the hills, or did you move it off the mountain?
Yeah, if you can see the stream, you can see where it is.
Oh, I see where it is now. Okay, yeah. All right, so it's more central to the Starcairns.
And it's close to Sarak enough to have that connection. That is.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot going on around there.
Yeah, that's all I was saying.
Oh yeah. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot going on. I don't talk about that because really the stuff that gets published around that mentions Hardby, but doesn't really do anything to talk about. The one great thing about Hardby is there's a lot of places to go adventure. It's a very crowded, it's a target-rich environment.
Yeah,
let's just put it that way. We can talk about Sandkester Castle, Meyer Castle. There's the whole Wild Coast thing. You can fight orcish pirates on the Woolly Bay. You can, there's humanoids up in the Aberrals Mountains. There's the barbarians in the mountains. There's
when Rary goes trader. He's not threatening Greyhawk City. Hardby's closer.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that piece. Actually, they do address that in Living Greyhawk, and that's
what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say that I think Rary threatens a lot of things, but Hardby's the closest one, and so they get the most attention.
Gary wants to know, Peace Smedger wants to know, why didn't Hardby take off as a city?
Why didn't it take off? I mean, as something that authors would write about?
No, I think he's talking historically.
Or more like in the campaign, it didn't
like why would you
to prominence. It didn't reach prominence in the Greyhawk campaign. It kind of stayed in the shadow of things.
It would be just complete speculation because I can't talk to Carl Sargent, I can't talk to Gary Gygax, I can't talk to, I know what the folks at Cannon Fire tried to do to rehabilitate it. But they were handicapped by the thing. I know Mona at the time was very much a canonista, meaning that if it's written, you got to use it. And, and I think this is the one time where we should have just wholesale thrown out a lot of crap and just kind of retconned it and, and just ignored some stuff and kind of made it more its own thing. I think it's a missed opportunity on our part, but I understand the time.
So what comes after From the Ashes?
Okay, so From the Ashes, Player's Guide to Greyhawk. And this is when Anne Brown writes something. Okay, let me grab Adventure Begins, Star Cairns. Where is my Player's Guide? I guess I didn't grab it. So I didn't grab it. Anne Brown writes Player's Guide with some help from various other people. Yeah, it's a great book. Right,
that's one of my faves.
And she did kind of round the edges of some of the stuff that Sargent did in that book, and then they promptly squared them again in the next one, which is the Adventure Begins. But there's not a whole lot here. Basically, on page 5, they talk about the Seaport City-State. I think the most important thing that happens is in the nomenclature section on page 16, this is the quote. Certain enhancements, such as adding town after the name of a village or city, for example, Hardby Town, are not uncommon. Terms for communities, hamlet, village, town, city, are casually applied in formal speech and writing. Safeton, Narwhal, Hardby, and Elmshire might be called villages by those who hold them in low esteem or cities who think them important. They are, in fact, towns. So this is where they officially say Hardby is a town. All right? We've locked it in, the end, period. So if you feel like if it's published this year ago, this is the retcon.
Gary has a wonderful follow-up on that one. Yeah. So then we bonked him on the head and came to bring him to his senses. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. And so there was basically one other reference in there about Greyhawk thugs that are nearly always male, except in Hardby, for some reason. They're female mostly. And then we get to The Adventure Begins, and that's kind of where there's a little bit more, but it's mostly them talking about what is going on. Again, Hardby is just an extension. We talk a lot about that. We don't get a whole lot about who are the Garnarks, who is the Despot. We don't have a name.
Who are they?
Right. Now, that's all going to change in 2000. Slavers.
In the year 2000.
In the year 2000. Yeah, that's when Slavers comes out, and that's when we start getting details. And whatever you feel about SKR, Sean K. Reynolds, as an author, in terms of I would say he's probably the third most important author in terms of published materials. Prolific behind Gary and Carl. They in terms of the stuff that comes before Living Greyhawk. And he's the one that really kind of developed the history. I think I believe it was either Roger
Religions.
Yeah, he actually talked about what's in the town and who the people are, and actually gave a name to the Despostrix for the first time.
What is it?
Oh, you would ask me that.
Elena
Norba, whatever. Yeah. Okay. There's so much going on here, and I'm still in the midst of my research. Like, I'm still pulling stuff out of these books, and I'm putting them into OneNote and trying to really kind of connect the dots. So basically, this is where you first and okay. So Slavers is really about the slavers. Remember what I was talking about? When you're a hammer, everything's a nail. Everything now is through the lens of the slave lords, right? Did I lose you? I can't hear you, Mike.
No, he just made it.
You're, okay.
Yeah, I'm just mouthing what you said.
Yeah. Hammer time. Anyway, so everything in this book is seen through the lens. So one of the interesting NPCs that comes out of this is I thought was this little halfling thief that basically is killing people on behest of the slave lords because they gave him an elephant. And that actually comes from Rogue's Gallery, and that particular what's his name again? Gormadak, the halfling, comes from the Rogue's Gallery. That was originally someone's player character, and that little piece about the elephant comes from that Rogue's Gallery. Is that he was searching for an elephant. That was the one thing he really wanted, and so SKR wrote this little piece that's saying that the slave lords gave him an elephant, and now he'll do anything they want. And he basically assassinates people inside the town on their behest. Yeah, he's this little neutral guy that doesn't really care. He's got what he wants, and he's just going to take care of business. And he is the assistant to this low-level wizard who does magical tattoos on the.
Love it.
Yeah,
love magic tattoos.
Yep.
Right, and this is where we learn about. Wilbur Carrister was first really talked about from the Ashes, but we get much more about him at this point. We learn about, we get a brief mention of Enna Norbe, the original founding Gynarch of Hardby from the Adventure Begins, but she's really talked about in Slavers. So I think this is actually the time where there's the actual connection between Zaggy. And because originally when he was talked about, he was from the Wild Coast. And then at some point, someone said, well, let's make him a descendant of the Landgraf of Celoton and Hardby, which wasn't really what they originally wrote him as. They just started to do this, and then everybody kind of put their own spin on it. Like I read one piece where he was actually a distant relative of one other that had married another Gynarch's daughter, and then another person says that he was actually descended from it. Yeah, and it's like I think it was kind of an unnecessary connecting point. I think Zaggy was fine on his own. He didn't necessarily need to be part of Hardby. And what they did is that's when they said the Green family was actually one of the families in Hardby, one of the Gynarch families, and it ended with Zaggy because he had no issue, which makes no sense because they track their lineage through the women. To put this bluntly, that it would be much more like the Jewish or some Native American traditions where they do matrilineal descent, where your bloodline is traced through your mother, and the most important person to you in terms of whether you are part of this family is who your mother is and who their mother is, and your dad really isn't all that important. And anyway, but that's my own personal spin on it. But that's kind of where we go with this. And so then, this is probably where, if you really want to mine something for a lot of information about Hardby, this is where we get our first map of Hardby, other than in The Adventure Begins. And the map that's in Slavers of the town of Hardby is exactly the same. Actually, could you?
Do we have the two fighting statues yet?
Yes, we have.
Yes, and this is where the statues come into play. Could you throw up map number 6, which will be this is the Adventure Begins version. The only difference in the Slavers version is there's some numbers added for some locations that they then didn't.
Oops, I think we lost Brian. I think his batteries went dead, so yep.
Yeah, I think you're muted, man. Yeah, or completely gone. The giant statue.
Yep, I think we lost him. So hang on a second. He's still
out there.
present in the call, but he will come back again. Now he's no longer present again. So now we need to reorganize things here and
I would like to say I could pick up where he left off, but I can't. So the 83
yep.
and our video's all messed up.
Yeah. It will come back again. Now it's correct again because now we lost Brian from the call. He will come back again.
Scott and Kanan in chat.
Oh, awesome.
So in chat they're talking about why so many NPCs come from Wild Coast.
Yeah, that's kind of I think one of the reasons is that Gary invented some of them in his book series, like the Artifact of Evil and stuff was there, and that's probably my only idea because that's where I got a lot from it. And
I really think the Wild Coast was supposed to be more important.
I think we got him back here, so let's see here. Yes, yay! Welcome back.
And he's back.
See if we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
One moment.
Yep, perfect. Welcome back.
So yeah, like Scott and Kanan saying, a lot of these original.
There we go. Now I can hear you.
Coast,
yep,
and
perfect.
maybe they kind of got that ball rolling and our contemporary adventures, and they just happen to all come from the Wild Coast. You know, maybe it was a banner year, a banner decade for Wild Coast.
Yeah, Wild Coast was one of the original adventure areas for Gygax's home campaign when it was long before it was published. It was one of these kind of the early areas, I guess. It's been there since forever.
Later canon, it's almost like the Wild Coast is like just a slum, and then it gets taken over, taken over by tourists.
Exactly, and it's one of these areas that never made it to nationhood, so to speak. All the other ones are part of kingdoms, whatever, and Wild Coast just left over. But now, back to you, Brian.
Hey, I'm sorry I dropped off there. My iPad Pro decided that, hey, it can't hold a charge.
Yep.
All right, so you can hear me just fine?
Yep, we can hear you perfect. Yep.
And my sound level's good? All right. So let me see. All right, so Slavers does this huge piece. Did you get the map up?
Yep, the map coming up. You can see it in a couple of seconds here. So
yeah.
That is the first one, I think.
So this is This is Sam Wood's first map. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I thought I got a good size of it. All right, and so this is actually the one from Slavers. Actually, it's the same map that Adventure Begins. Slavers. You'll notice the two statues there, which is referenced in Slavers. Was done by some Gynarch at some point in the history. Not exactly sure when or what the Gynarch's name was, but she thought it was an interesting thing to put up because, it showed the foolishness of men, I guess. Now, for me, those statues represent an interesting thing. And so I recently picked up Dragon Heist, the 5th edition adventure set in Waterdeep, and they have stats for these basically massive statues that defend the city in times of great trouble.
Ooh.
And I think I'm going to steal that idea and the stat blocks for those statues because the way I'm conceiving, so if you look at this, like the city has this one stone wall, and then they have kind of this exposed port, and they need something defending. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to that jetty that's going off there.
I lost the. There we go. I'm not going to use this because then all of a sudden when I shift focus. So please go on.
Yeah, so that jetty that was in that picture, I'm going to fortify that. I'm going to probably wrap the city around the top, going to the lighthouse along the northern border that's empty there. There's going to be a wall going around it because I'm going to make it a city. It's not going to be a town anymore. And so I'm going to beef it up a little bit. And in order for it to survive raids by ogres and from wild tribesmen and whatever comes out of the desert, it needs to be a bit better defended. Especially when you have Pomarge pirates and all that. I just think that the way that
right?
Yeah. What's that?
I said at least the wealthy people will be protected.
Exactly. They want to have it their wall, so yeah. You can have a
Right,
high
but
quarter that is walled. Yep.
well, I think that most of the city should be walled. I think a wooden palisade doesn't make any sense if you're constantly being threatened by these things.
Yeah.
Sure, you got
But
very
back before the wars, there wasn't that much direct threat, more than local bandits and maybe the ogre
they
from out the
were they
wilderness.
were they were actually under threat from the dervishes from the desert and
Ah,
from
there you have it. Yeah.
yeah. There's
Yeah.
ogres, there's humanoids, there's even a couple hill giants.
hmm
And then you have like the Mines of Father Eye with a beholder. You've got the Ghost Tower. You've got all the stuff that's in the Star Cairns. I'm surprised that Hardby still stands. There is so much stuff going on out there. I think that in my version of Hardby, I'm going to beef it up. I'm going to make it larger. I'm going to have a little more. It's going to be a walled city. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going back to 570 CY, so I don't have to deal with all of the stuff coming after. I can make the city the way I want to, and then if Hardby comes under the control of Greyhawk, that'll be a story piece that involves my players. So but there's that. But it's coming back to what's been written. So this is really our first actual map we get, right? And the map since then, the only thing that gets added on, there's another map, which is map number 7, and this will take us into Dungeon 109 and the Living Greyhawk campaign. This is Paul Luby's contribution, right? And he took what was ostensibly
Hardby, City of the Scorned.
Yeah, that's the one. So basically, this is the same map, only they added the wooden palisade they talked about. It's physically represented on the map, but it's still the same map. The stairway that's near the lighthouse on the northern end is gone for some reason. But this is the map that they used for Living Greyhawk. And the differences between what happened in the Paul Luby's article and what happens in Slavers is Paul Luby just takes it to a much more detailed level. I would consider what Paul Luby wrote would be the equivalent of what would happen if I was just doing my my campaign and I wanted to really think so for instance in Slavers there is this inn that has a half-orc proprietress that has this idol that she got somewhere from Monoland, and it's just described as this green idol that she forces everyone to worship at midnight in the thing, and everyone kind of humors her. Luby then goes on to actually explicitly state which god that idol represents, which is an Ulman god, the vampire bat god, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Slots.
Yeah, that's the one. And I think that's an interesting choice for Paul Luby, but I think that one of the things I try to do is if I'm writing a piece of source material, is I want to leave that for the DM to decide, unless it has particular relevance to the thing I'm writing at that moment. I like, for me, that could have been an old one, a Cthulhu-like creature. It could be some alien dead god. Whatever you want it to be. You didn't have to define it by what was already published from Slavers. And I think, but it's an example of what you can do with the general stuff. It's an example of what to do in your own campaign. It's like, if you want to make it specific, you can. And so that's a perfectly legitimate way to do it. And I think what Luby was doing for the Greyhawk campaign was he was saying, this is what Hardby is for Living Greyhawk. And that's exactly what he needed to do. Because, in Living Greyhawk, you couldn't have every single person sitting at the table define what that idol was. You need to explicitly say what it was. And it served its purpose. But I don't think you need to be bound by it if you're trying to do your own campaign and you want that green idol to be something different. I would go with the Slavers route and either just leave it ill-defined, and if it becomes like, if the players want to know about it, then you can define it. Or if you want to do an adventure around that, then define it. But leave yourself options. Don't close it off. That's my advice to you as DMs and people. And this is kind of like something that I would say is, this is an object lesson on what you should be doing when you're writing source material for people, is try to leave do what Guy did, is make a reference and then walk away from it and let other people define it. Let me get my camera. Yeah, there we go. All right. So that is kind of where we are at in terms of source material. There is some Living Greyhawk adventures. They're very hard to get a hold of. I ran and played a few of those. I'll just say, just kind of giving you a summary, you basically, in the Bright Desert series, in that you are working for Kirstan, the paladin up in the Aberrals Mountains. She sends you on missions. You wind up in one adventure module, and this is one of those things, and this is Living Greyhawk, not previous, is they tied in the Spotrix into the ceremony for the Flight of Fiends and the Crook of Rao, and she's dying in Living Greyhawk from that ceremony, much like the acolytes that were helping the Canon Hazen during the original piece. Now, that was purely an invention of Living Greyhawk. There is nothing in the previously published stuff that said that. That's just something they chose to do. And that's, again, perfectly legitimate choice. I'm just saying is that Living Greyhawk as a campaign, I don't necessarily see that as a source, other than the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer. I don't really see that as a source of stuff. I know Anna uses it because
I use it because of the place names, but I don't care much about the stories. But if they fill in voids and put in towns and interesting places on the map, I add them. Yeah.
Yeah, because your map is a hungry beast and you need
yes,
that.
exactly.
So,
yep.
And
very
again,
well
perfectly
put.
legitimate.
Yep.
So, the piece I'm trying to come across here is that every author that has touched Hardby has had a specific need with that, and it's never been about Hardby. It's always been about the mission of the war, the slavers. In Living Greyhawk, it's the slavers and the Bright Desert forces of Rary the Traitor, and that culminates in one module where you get to witness the death of the Spotrix. And there's this whole political choice: is whatever faction you support in that module, either Hardby stays as part of the domain of Greyhawk or splinters off independent and allies with the Bright Lands. And that was it. Yeah, that's an interesting choice if you're running that, post Greyhawk Wars piece. I think that's an interesting choice, and it was something very interesting that they did in about year 5-6 of the Living Greyhawk campaign. So that puts it around 2005, 2006. And and maybe 2004, 2005. It's always off a year, I think, because it started in 2000. Yeah. Anyway, you get the idea. Anyway, so that's basically kind of the canon of Hardby that we have. Now, I obviously glossed over a ton of places like the Spotted Cow Inn and the Palace of the Gynarchs and all the different things that they've done. But if you really want to do that, go read the source material. And I'm still working my way through it. I'm still entering it into my OneNote thing so I can kind of look at what it is. I'm going to farm, like Anna does for her maps, names and places of things I like, and I'm going to use some of the history that I like, and I'm going to toss the rest away, and I'm going to make my own. I'm going to keep it very loose, and my players will have a sense of what Hardby is, but it's going to be much more about the Gynarchy and not this merchant alliance and this military port. It's going to have its own life. If that happens because we go into a Greyhawk Wars mode in the campaign, then Hardby might shift, but at least you're going to know what Hardby was before in my campaign. Mm-hmm. And that's really the best thing I can say is make this thing your own. Don't be a slave to what was written. Look at what you like and what works for you and use it, and toss the rest. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, unless your players are interested in it, who cares? And writing lore is great. I'm a history major. I was a history major, and I love that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean anything unless it hits the table. And so Any questions?
That's there hardly
All
be any
right.
questions after that. Well, the chat probably has wonderful questions, but that was a fantastic kind of review going over. Yeah,
I never knew there was that much going on with Hardby.
Yep. I've heard some of this because Brian, you and me, we've had parts of this discussion a couple of times the past couple of months, but this was awesome. Now you filled in.
I actually regret not using it more in my campaigns.
Yeah, it's. Mm-hmm.
I think it's a huge missed opportunity for a lot of people, and it's no one person's fault. I just don't think it ever really got the attention it deserved.
Yeah.
And I think, and here's the thing I really think that's important about Hardby is it's a great means of contrasting with Greyhawk.
Yeah.
So Greyhawk is all about being self-made. If you have enough money, enough power, you can be somebody in Greyhawk. You don't have to be a noble. But in order to really like one of the things that's interesting that this crept in late second edition is some unnamed despotrix basically said only noble women can own property in the walls of the city of Hardby.
Gasp.
Right? Yeah. And so, okay, that's an interesting idea. I don't know how well that's going to work, but everyone, men and women who are not nobles could get land grants outside a city. So, that makes sense. You want to colonize and farmland and hunting and mines and all that stuff. Yeah. But the city itself is controlled by the nobility, and you can rent or you can marry into one of the noble families, and that's the only way that you're going to get own property inside the city proper.
Yeah. Gary Julian has some interesting thing is that I would bring back its Sewell roots. And then he also said any connections between Hardby and the Sewell Geonarchs and the Sewell of Moor or Moor Castle. Yeah.
Castle Mayer? Yeah. No. At least as it's written, the original matriarch that comes across Woolly Bay from Safeton is escaping from all these crazy menfolk who are just screwing everything up, and she wants a place to study her magic in peace. And that's her motivation. She's part of that whole anarch crew of wild coasters.
Yeah.
And she says, these guys are too crazy even for me. And she takes her brethren across, and whether they're pure Sewell or not doesn't really say. It's up to you. So here's this. So for my campaign, this is how I'm going to kind of play it. We'll talk a little. So let's talk about the kind of the things I'm thinking about. So like, I'm going to play up the fact. So kind of like what Gary wrote about the Silent Ones in Keelland, which are this very Sewell based.
You must have read the chat. That's exactly what came through this chat. Right. Awesome.
So I didn't actually see the chat because I have it.
Yeah, it was perfect. Gary typed it just as you said it. Yep.
Right. So that inspired me. It's like, so I think of, so this is a contrast. So the Greyhawk is the city of wizards, right? They have the Wizards Guild. They have the school. They're all about learning. Whether they're effective or not, that's a whole nother story, right? Whether you want to make them bumbling kind of academics who are, heads are in the clouds, or whether you want them to be more serious, that's up to you, however you want to play that. But they're this big center of learning. So to me, the Geonarchs are pretty much described as these people have magical power, and they're interested about learning about this, and they're not about schools and all that. So I kind of see them more as sorcerers than in terms of third edition
of your pants magic. So kind of
right. They understand magic on a more fundamental level, and they just access it. They're not really learning it from books. They might do ritual stuff, like to create those giant statues that are going to walk and destroy ships.
That's one of my questions, but I'll come back to it. Yep.
And they might learn about the nature of magic, but they access it at a different level. And so that's my contrast. And they are more about, are you in the family? And power comes from your bloodline and not from just going and reading a book. And so this to me is a contrast between what Hardby is. So I was kind of talking about how Greyhawk is, you can be self-made in Greyhawk. If you work hard enough, you can buy a noble title.
Yeah.
Or you can just be powerful enough, everyone just assumes you're a noble. That's not true in Hardby. You have to marry into the family in order to be a noble. The things are more stratified there. And so Hardby isn't all peaches and cream. It's not some utopia. It's different. And so what I'm looking for, so like the original settlers of Hardby were followers of Weejas. Weejas?
Weejas, yeah.
And yeah, I tend to mispronounce things, so I just have to check myself every once in a while.
Yep.
Yeah. So to me, their interest in magic and death isn't necessarily so much necromancy, is that I see it as that there's two aspects of Weejas. The nobility worships the ruby witch, the sorceress, and the side that the hoi polloi, the people of Hardby, see are the not the harbingers, but the what would you call it? The people that oversee people's dying. And I kind of was inspired by Dia de Muertos and Roman ancestor worship. And I was thinking that there's basically two versions of the church. The outward facing part of the church is the one that deals with ancestry. This ties into the Sul background. The Sul people are very much interested in who's your ancestor. What's your bloodline? That's a very important thing to the Sul. And so that part of the church is very much about recording who you are and where you came from and making sure. And then I had this cool little thing I was going to do with the Dynarchs is the Despotrix, when they die, they do a death mask and there's a ritual done. And then there's basically essentially an artificial intelligence of that Despotrix that can be accessed by the next Despotrix. It isn't really that person. You're not talking to that person, but you're talking to all her memories. And you can access that and get advice. But they're never going to remember you outside of that one moment so every time you go there, they're going to say, who are you? And you have to explain yourself again. You have this conversation. So it's essentially, there's a throwaway line about Hardby is that they have probably the most extensive record in history of any place in the Wild Coast and even in Greyhawk. And so for me, it's like that ties again into this whole thing about the Sul's obsession with ancestry. And so instead of it being this, Sul power uber alles thing that the Scarlet Brotherhood is interested in, they're just interested in who you are through the lines and what knowledge you're able to pull forward. So it's really important for them to have these burial rituals and these masks and the celebration of your ancestors. And so there'll be kind of like a similar festival to Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead, in Hardby. That's going to be more of a celebration than it is the kind of Flan, Nerul, fear this Reaper type of piece. Is Weejas is more of someone, a protector of the dead, and sees them on their journey. And so that's kind of my take on it. I haven't fully fleshed that out. I'm working on that piece. That again, that's to be a contrast to, but there'll be other gods there. I'll probably have Palor because that's a common god. Definitely St. Cuthbert, if not in the city, probably outside of it, because they'll be more in the compo, out in the places outside of Hardby that are part of that place. Like for instance, if you go across High Pass, and then to Ogre Meat, and then there's like this whole kind of river valley area there, that would be a great place for the population to be farming and mining and doing all sorts of things. And that would be some place that you'd be most likely see people like Cuthbert, because they're going to need protection from the humanoids and the raiders and all that. And so I have ideas. I haven't completely locked myself down, and I'm actually thinking about just disposing of the Star Cairns because I'm not really interested in that particular part of it. And it makes that place so busy. I'll keep the Ghost Tower there just to put the fear of whatever Greyhawk gods into my players, because they shouldn't be going anywhere near that place until they get to higher level. And then, we'll have the desert. So, and that's going to come up to my next big thing is like, right now, everyone kind of talks about, well, 4th and 5th edition brought the Dragonborn and all these other things, tieflings and all that. What do we do with them? So my solution my campaign's pre-Greyhawk War, so no Rary the Traitor. So what I have is, Shadowdos back in the Empire Saloon in the Bright Desert wasn't tricked by just anyone. He was tricked by Tiamat. And what she did is she cursed him, but she took most of those people and transformed them into the Dragonborn, and they became her army out on the plains. And then what's going to happen is Tiamat wants power on Oerth, and she doesn't really have a block of worshippers there. And so she has motivation to get the Dragonborn back on Oerth and take back over the old Empire Saloon that they used to be a part of. And Bahamut wants them back because he wants to tear them away from Tiamat. And so both these gods are working to bring them back to Oerth. And then they're going to land in the middle of the desert and push the dervishes out. And so there's going to be this thing that's happening. And then what's going to happen is the player characters, if they choose to interact with this event, are going to determine how the Dragonborn interact with the rest of the world, whether they're going to be friend or foe. And they could either be a really strong lawful evil presence in the underbelly of Ernst and Greyhawk and Hardby, or they could be maybe something a little less harsh and a friend, or at least an ally of convenience against Ayuz in the north. And so that's kind of the bare outlines of what I'm planning to do. And that's how I'm planning. I mean, you can bring them in any which way you want, but that's how I'm planning to do it in my campaign. So initially, Dragonborn is not going to be a playable race, but when they land, oh yes, I'll establish that, and there'll be that's going to be one of those big campaign-shaking events that everyone's going to get to participate in.
Sweet.
Yeah. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
All right. Oh, hey, Anna, could you throw up the coat of arms I did for you?
Sure. We
for
can,
Hardby?
Yeah, we can zoom in here, and we zoom in a little bit more.
Yeah, because I'd like to talk about that and why
There we go.
This will kind of bring us full circle back into heraldry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so stop right there. Okay, actually bring it up a little bit so you can bring the Hardby Marines back into the frame a little bit. I can see the Hardby shield that I created, but down below. Okay, yeah, perfect, right there. Okay, so you see the shield. This is a red lotus on a purple, light blue, and silver shield. And this is the arms I created for the Gynarchy. There has not been a coat of arms for Hardby. Everyone assumed that the Hardby Marines arms was the one for Hardby, but that's actually the military arms of the Hardby Marines.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then I've had a couple of people that I've shown this to. I haven't really gone wide with it. I hurried it up so that Anna could get it into her latest map update because she heard about it and she wanted it.
Yep.
And they asked me, well, why this lotus? It's so different from everything else. Because, well, again, I'm trying to make Hardby a little bit different. The color scheme on the shield behind the red lotus is very reminiscent of Safeton, where they fled from. And it kind of harkens to that. But the red lotus, in my head canon, and this is just a bare outline of it, is the original symbol of Norbe, and it goes back to the Sul Imperium. And now whether that is actually their symbol or something they appropriated, that's up for you to decide. I haven't really decided for myself yet. But that's the symbol that they chose. And that, and so there'll be variations of this symbol. This will be a theme in some of their other heraldry that I do eventually. And so this is what I created. Now I have a much more stylized version that has some pretty supporters and
the real heraldry. Yeah, that one is fantastic. Yep.
Yeah, and that it's a little more than just this, and it's really, really pretty. But this is what I created for Hardby, because I felt like in order for them to get some respect and be a part of the world, they need their own shield.
Definitely.
And not to be the also ran and the afterthought. We need to kind of see them as their own thing first. Mm-hmm. And I think there is some really interesting things we can do with Hardby, because this is one of the few places that women really control the show. I mean, yeah, the Contessa in the county of Ernst is there, but most of the women that show up in Greyhawk are either villains like Zugmoy or Igwiv, and there's a couple heroes here and there, but you don't see in a lot of leadership positions. And I think this is like something where you could really like kind of showcase a difference in the campaign, and that's still part of the canon that's in there. I'm going to probably shake some stuff up. Like, I know that Shane, for instance, changed Oldemara from male to a female god. And I'll just say this out loud, is I don't know why they affixed particular genders to these gods, because the descriptions of them, they're very fluid in how they present themselves to the world. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of gods walking or living on Earth. If you look at the original box set listings of them, a lot. And a lot of them have multiple aspects and forms that they take. They are not one thing. Now, Mike, I know when you did the comics, you had to kind of lock them into a particular look. Otherwise, otherwise people couldn't track, because there's just so many of them. Yeah. And they had, I think only Olona was the one where you had
brunette blonde. I don't know.
But you mostly kept her blonde. But there was this thing where she shifted back and forth a little bit occasionally. But like Earthnal has multiple forms. Oldemara, and a lot of these people just, in my mind, when you're talking about a Greyhawk god, it's not like a demigod or someone who's ascended. These things are so far beyond our understanding. What sex and how they look is purely a human contrivance so that we can potentially understand them. Right? And and so for me, the churches and how they talk about the gods and what aspects they bring forward is really more of an expression of mortals' needs to understand something in a way they can understand it. And gods really don't care. They just want the prayers, right? They'll appear however they want to appear in order to get that. And so getting locked into that, I think, is a mistake. And I think that playing with that can have some interesting roleplay possibilities. Anyway. All right.
That was a wonderful way of coming back to where we started with Heraldry. Right. That was fantastic. So, Mike, do we have any more questions and stuff to catch up on?
No, we're starting to drop off now.
Yeah, so I think we gone 2.5 hours. So this has been the longest episode, but it's been fantastic.
We're honking over.
Yep.
Wow.
So,
I did not even realize.
Oh, this is fantastic. We have some
content.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'd love to do it again. I mean, I still have so much more to do on Hardby, and then I need to start writing up my own stuff.
We need to have a Hardby session every season. We have to have a Hardby episode or something like that. Come back to it.
And I think that this kind of shows that you can do a deep dive on it, and it can be interesting. And I think that people, Georgia O'Keeffe. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah.
I intentionally did not go Georgia O'Keeffe. That's not what that was intended as at all.
Yeah.
But
it also shows that not only the story of Hardby, but it also shows what much you can do with any city or town if you really dig into it, so to speak. You can make a lot more out of it than what's there to begin with.
And I think it's important that you understand I mean, like, I've been watching videos, I've been reading transcripts of chats and different things from Gary, from Rob Kuntz, Gary Gygax, Rob Kuntz. I just watched a 2-hour video from GaryCon by Tim Kask, which was amazingly informative of kind of the mindset that was going on in the first 5 years of TSR and how they thought about things. And we only see what was written, and we interpret. It's like we're seeing just only part of the picture, and kind of like diving behind some of the stuff and seeing the history of it and how it was written. Like, we would have. Carl's dying is the only reason we know that the City of Greyhawk box set was his first piece for TSR, and it was done in this very rapid way, and that puts a different spin on that piece. So it's amazing the stuff I'm discovering, and that there's still something to discover. I think it's always amazing to me is that I don't think I've broken a ton of new ground, but I've put together some things that hasn't been put together before. And that's interesting. Yeah. So thank you for having me on here.
Thank you so much for being on this. Been awesome. So okay, so I guess time to wrap up episode 9 of the Legends and Lore show, and we will be back next week. We haven't really done, but I want to have one little final note that I watched the Return of Greyhawk, Shane's campaign here on the channel, and they had an epic dragon fight in the last episode. That was kind of cool, and they tied into not only dragons but undead dragons. And it was kind of cool. So I was thinking maybe, Mike, we should look into Dragons of Greyhawk for next episode. We'll see. We have a couple of other stuff to dig into too, but that's one of the ideas that we might be.
Gary Holian wants to do a random topic generator.
Yes, exactly. We should do a random topic. Yeah, I saw that was awesome comment. So
if you're going to do a deep dive, there's no way to do random topic. You'd never be able to get through all of it. I mean, I've been working on this Hardby thing for over a month. I'm still not done. But if we're going to do dragon topic, just for Gary, I think you should talk about Volt, the blue dragon, and from the Bright Desert, because I know he loves him so much.
Oh, that's cool. Yep, that's cool. So, but I don't know that much about dragons in Greyhawk. So, but that was
the Volt got killed off.
Okay, good. Yep.
They did not like him because of his name. So, anyway, but there's a ton of dragons. There's Greyhawk dragons. There's all kinds of dragons. It'll be a fun topic.
So, thank you so much for watching. We will be back next week, and good night.
And break.
Are we off?